We knew this would happen. And now we want President Maduro back. And now we want to affirm that even though you kidnapped President Maduro, it doesn't mean that the Bolivarian Revolution is over.
Western media is not very reliable in general. It certainly isn't reliable when it comes to Venezuela. So what is happening? What happened during the attack? How did you experience it? Did you wake up to it?
So just to give you like a timeline of the things that happened, basically at around 2 a.m. in the morning, I woke up with the sound, with this tremendous loud explosion sound. Of course, I have no idea what was happening. It felt like an earthquake, like maybe the sky was falling down. I immediately got up. I immediately went to the window. I could hear the explosions. I could hear the planes flying, but I couldn't actually see them. But I knew they were close, and I knew that something bad was happening because the sound was like something like I've never heard before. Immediately, friends and family began calling me. We began exchanging messages and phone calls, just trying to understand what was happening. We all knew that this was something bad. There was a part of me that already knew that this was most likely a U.S. military aggression, but of course we needed to remain calm, so I just tried to wait until there was absolute confirmation. In the meanwhile, I was seeing videos and photos on social media of people like me who woke up to these loud sounds, and they looked out the window and they saw that there were explosions around where they lived. And so in total, there were like 6 places in Caracas that were hit by U.S. strikes. Not only military complex places, because the U.S. is saying that they only hit these military sites, and that's not true. They actually also hit civilian areas, urban areas, civilian populations. For example, they mentioned Fuerte Tiuna, which is a military complex, but Fuerte Tiuna is not just a military complex. It has a lot of residential areas around it. So the strikes were actually quite tremendous, and they actually caused some civilian casualties, which we will have a balance about it soon enough from the Venezuelan government. So that's what happened. Around 3 a.m. in the morning, we got like the first confirmation from the Venezuelan government that indeed we were under military attack. The communique said that it called the people to just remain calm, but at the same time was saying this is the moment to resist, this is the moment to fight. Everybody has to be in high alert. Everybody has to be ready to defend the patria, to defend the sovereignty. So we waited. We were just like, okay, so we're just gonna continue to wait for more confirmation from the government. Soon after, the defense minister, Vladimir Padrino Lopez, he went on television and he said the same thing. He said, yes, we are being attacked by the United States. This is a criminal imperialist aggression. This is illegal. This is, of course, something that the Venezuelan army is going to face with our heads holding high. He said that the military was already in the streets. They were already trying to take control of the situation. And he called the Venezuelan people to, of course, trust in the military, trust in the militia, trust in this civilian military union, and to remain calm inside their houses. Soon after that, we got the most devastating statement from the Venezuelan government, which was Vice President Delcy Rodriguez saying that indeed President Maduro had been kidnapped alongside his wife, Celia Flores. And I think it's very important that we emphasize this part. President Nicolás Maduro, an elected constitutional president, was kidnapped by U.S. forces. He was not captured. He was not arrested. No, he was
removed.
Exactly. None of that. We all know that the United States has built this fantasy narrative that the Venezuelan government is somehow behind this huge narco-trafficking organization, with absolutely no proof about that, no evidence about that.
Not everything you see, not everything you hear is the truth. Why am I saying so? You see, on January day 3, very early in the morning, news came out that Maduro was arrested. And, everyone was curious why Nicolás Maduro was arrested, right? He was arrested because allegedly he did a couple of things. And the U.S. conducted what is called how is it called? They did something which is called Operation Absolute Resolve, which was done very early in the morning, January 3rd, Why? Because Maduro, according to the U.S. of Mr. Donald Trump, is that Maduro did a couple of things that were not right. Maduro was accused of narco-terrorism and drug trafficking, accused of corruption, bribery, weapon charges, foreign terrorist designation, election fraud. But brothers and sisters, we all know the truth. We all know the feature, we all know the characteristic of Mr. Donald Trump with framing people so that he can gain what you want to do or what you want to gain, right? And so we have a Venezuelan journalist who comes out and publicly dismantles Nicolás Maduro's, the Trump propaganda. So I just want us to watch this video because it is crazy that the world is watching this take place, but we all know the truth. We all know how this is, being played. So I want us to watch this video because the moment a Venezuelan journalist publicly dismantles Nicolás Maduro's Trump propaganda, what is really being exposed is not just a single political lie, but the deeper mechanics of authoritarian storytelling. Understand that in recent years, the Maduro government has really attempted to attack Mr. Donald Trump as an imperial villain whose chaos validates Venezuelan authoritarianism, or paradoxically, as a proof that Western democracy is a sham. And this, back and forth has led to a lot of things. I want us to watch this video. I'll be back and then I'll be sharing my thoughts in regards to this, brothers and sisters. I'm your host and presenter H-Tech Stories. Let's watch the video. I'll be back.
They have been using that narrative to kill civilian people on small boats in the Caribbean for 4 months. And now they're using the same narrative to kidnap a elected president and to bomb civilian populations in Venezuela. Caracas wasn't the only place that was attacked. There were also strikes in different states, Miranda, Aragua, La Guaira. We have been seeing videos and images on social media of people who witnessed these attacks. So we know that there were actually some really harm to the civilian population. After all of that, when we had confirmation that we were on the U.S. military attack, when we had confirmation that President Maduro had been kidnapped, of course, the next stage was we need to go to the streets. So that's what we did. Right in the morning, when around 9 a.m., we started sort of exchanging messages. Okay, so where do we go? Of course, we have to go to Miraflores. We have to go to the presidential palace. And that's what we did. We went there. Of course, the city was very militarized. There was a lot of people who were just kind of looking for essentials, people looking for water, looking for food, trying to, abastecerse, find all of these supplies because we don't know what's going to happen in the next following days. But there were also people near Miraflores who were just gathering there in solidarity, who were just taking turns to speak on the microphone and speak their mind, denounce that the U.S. had violated Venezuela's sovereignty, that the U.S. had engaged in this criminal bombing against Venezuela, demanding that President Maduro is returned to Venezuela, demanding proof of life of President Maduro and his wife, Silvia Flores, and of course, denouncing that behind this whole military operation was regime change, which is what Venezuela has been denouncing forever. We have always been saying that everything that the U.S. has been doing, the narrative of drug trafficking, the militarization of the Caribbean, these accusations against President Maduro of narco-terrorism, we know that behind all of that is just the intention to take control of Venezuela, to take control of Venezuelan resources. And that's exactly what Trump admitted when he gave that press conference, saying that Maduro had been captured, which is actually kidnapped. He said that from now on, the U.S. is going to run Venezuela. He's going to take control of Venezuela, and they're going to take control of Venezuelan oil. So that's exactly what they wanted. And they say it. They use the narrative, but they also admit the truth at some point.
Right,
so that's basically what has been going on here. So these are two people that were in the streets. They were just, these signs were something that happened very sporadically in the moment. People decided, okay, we need to make signs. We need to write something down. So people were handing around these cartulinas. Spontaneously, these cartulinas and they were just making these messages, basically saying, we want President Maduro back. President Maduro continues to be our president. The revolution hasn't died. The revolution continues. Just affirming this sending these messages out there saying that we're not giving up. We're
Yeah.
not giving up. Moments like this, we have to understand that this is such a new experience. We have never been through something like this. Venezuela has been through so many terrible circumstances. We have been under U.S. sanctions for a decade. We have been through devastating humanitarian consequences because of U.S. sanctions. We have resisted so much. We have faced so many coups, so many coup attempts of mercenary invasions. But this is something that, of course, we haven't experienced so far. We have been announcing that this was going to happen. There was a UN emergency meeting that Venezuela called, and not so recently, in which the Venezuelan ambassador, Samuel Moncada, he said it like that in front of all of these countries. He said, the U.S. is preparing to invade Venezuela. The United States is preparing to do something against President Maduro, a decapitation strike, something. And we have been announcing this, and nobody did anything. So that this is why right now when you go to the streets and you see Venezuelans protesting, it is basically people saying, we've been saying this, and we've been saying that we were going to be attacked. We knew this would happen, and now we want President Maduro back, and now we want to affirm that even though you kidnapped President Maduro, it doesn't mean that the Bolivarian Revolution is over. It doesn't mean that this is that we and are going to continue fighting. Of course not.
Right.
Yeah, so these are all people who just spontaneously got there. They just gathered there, and there was a stage and a microphone, and anybody who wanted to speak, they could do it. So everybody will just go up to the stage, and they will just start speaking about their own experiences with the Venezuelan Revolution. There was a man who was saying, "Oh, I am Colombian, and I came to Venezuela, and I immediately fell in love with the Bolivarian Revolution because it was a process that made me feel like human dignity was actually something that was achievable, like this is a government that cares about its people, about education, about healthcare, about and the dignity of just being a people with sovereignty and self-determination, not being the backyard of the United States, not being just these, not having puppet governments that just do anything that the United States wants." So he was talking about their experience, and like him, many people will do the same. And like there was I am a worker. I support President Maduro the same way I support President Chavez. And there were people who had like this absolute clarity, which is something that I admire so much about the Venezuelan people in general. There's so much political consciousness. There was someone explaining Venezuela nationalized its natural resources because it is our natural resources, and we needed those we needed to nationalize it so we could actually provide for our people, so we could give free healthcare and free education to our people. So the oil belongs to Venezuelan, not to President Donald Trump.
I want to read or to ask you to respond to some comments that in the chat, and this is such a common talking point, which is that people will say, "No, my family is in Venezuela and they're so happy about what's happening," or "No, I have a friend who's in Venezuela and they're happy." And you're bringing on Andreina and she's biased, and Katie, you're biased, and you just love Maduro and you're not showing the real truth. So what is your response to that argument?
So listen, since the whole bombing happened, there hasn't been any single people in the streets, any single kind of celebration protest in the streets. That is not the Venezuelan people in general. The Venezuelan people, they do not want war. They don't want military intervention. So no, that is not happening. There is no such thing as the country is just calm. The country is just quietly waiting to trusting that the Venezuelan authorities are handling the situation, trusting that we are going to resist the situation, we're going to fight back, we're going to somehow overcome what is happening right now. I also have friends and family from all the political spectrum that we have in Venezuela. So I also have this perspective that I know that many people who may not support the Venezuelan government, they also do not support the intervention of the U.S. military. They do not support this colonialist kind of mentality. I think people confuse this with the small sector that represents Maria Corina Machado, who we all know is someone who openly welcomes U.S. military intervention, someone who has been asking for an invasion, someone who has been selling Venezuela, like Venezuela is just something that she can sell. She has been saying that Venezuela is a sexy woman that you can just give her up. We have all this oil, we're so attractive. You can come and take anything you want once we get rid of Maduro and everybody else. So there's a small section, a small radical section like Maria Corina Machado that supports this, but that's not the majority of the Venezuelan people. And we're not seeing any. I mean, I've been in the streets. I've been walking around. I've seen people, so I know for a fact that that is not happening.
Yeah. And also, of course, poor Corina Machado, she's Trump does not have a lot of confidence in her. So that must have been awkward for her to watch that press conference.
We still have a Venezuelan government. Vice President Delcy Rodriguez is in power right now. She gave a press conference earlier today. She was alongside the entire military officers and other Venezuelan officials, and she was saying that we are still here, we are resisting, we are maintaining operations, we are declaring a state of commotion in Venezuela. We are going to give a balance very soon about the casualties of the U.S. bombings.
Yeah.
So there's no vacuum of power. There's no such thing. The U.S. has been claiming that they are negotiating with Delcy Rodriguez. They first said that she had already fled to Russia. Then they said that they were negotiating with her. And she very clearly stated, I'm not negotiating with anybody. I am here.
Right.
I am with the Venezuelan people. We are calling the Venezuelan people to resist. And we are asking, demanding that President Maduro is returned back safe.
So, central to this critique is the concept of framing people. And this is a tactic perfected and which authoritarian regimes study closely. Framing involves constructing a narrative where individuals or groups are blamed or criminalized or even elevated, not based on evidence, but based on political convenience. The Venezuelan journalist highlights how Trump repeatedly framed immigrants, framed journalists, political opponents, and even institutions of the enemy of the people, thereby redirecting public anger away from corporate power and systemic inequality. This mirrors the Maduro's government's own strategy of, framing dissidents as CIA agents, traitors, or imperial collaborators. Now, by drawing this parallelism, the journalist reveals an uncomfortable truth: how authoritarian regimes do not oppose Trump-style politics. They learn from it, right? So you understand that Trump's most consistent framing tactic was the creation of enemies. Immigrants, journalists, judges, intelligence agencies, and political opponents were all framed as corrupt and dangerous or disloyal. This framing served two purposes. First, it redirected public frustration away from structural problems like inequality and corporate power. Second, it made Trump appear as the only trustworthy figure fighting on behalf of the people, quotes and quotes, right? So when facts are contradicted, his claims, he framed those facts themselves as products of conspiracy, which allowed lies to survive unchallenged among loyal audiences. Also, what you need to understand is that lies works best when they are simple and repeatable. Now, Trump mastered slogans and sound bites that could travel faster than corrections. Fake news, witch hunt, rigged system. These phrases were not arguments, they were frames. Once repeated, once accepted, they reshaped how supporters processed all incoming information. Now, any negative report was dismissed before being examined. This is why fact-checking alone often failed, because framing operates as an emotional and psychological level, not a logic one. The United States has a long history of framing narratives to win public support, especially during moments of conflict or crisis. From wars to foreign interventions to domestic policing, framing has been used to justify actions that might otherwise face resistance. Leaders often simplify complex reality into moral stories of good versus evil because such stories mobilize consent quickly. Trump did not invent this habit, he amplified it and made it more explicit using social media and constant repetition to bypass traditional filters. So you understand how this framing worked, right? So framing in the US is deeply tied to the idea of manufacturing consent. Governments understand that public approval is easier to maintain through fear and identity than through transparency. By framing issues as threats to national survivals, leaders reduce spaces for nuance or dissent. Trump leaned heavily on this tradition, framing himself as the defender of the nation against internal and external enemies, even when those enemies, quotes unquote, were domestic institutions themselves. And you can remember a time when Mr. Donald Trump was trying to fight the Black history, and he was trying to frame Black history as divisive. He was trying to frame Black history as propaganda and as dangerous. Are those words familiar to you? If you're a Black person who's watching this video, you'll definitely know that these words are not familiar to you. These are things that have often happened, right? These are things that have often happened, and that's how the United States have been operating. Another reason framing is effective in the US is the media ecosystem. Now, competitive, fast-paced media rewards drama over depth. Trump exploited this environment by making outrageous claims that dominated headlines, forcing journalists to react on his terms, even when his statements were false. They shaped the conversation. These allowed lies to function strategically, not as mistakes, but as tools to control attention and define the narrative battlefield. Also, framing also helps leaders avoid accountability. When failures occur, blame can be shifted to scapegoats, bureaucrats, foreigners, minorities, or political rivals. Trump used this tactic relentlessly, framing investigations into his conduct as attacks on his supporters rather than inquiries into facts. This emotional inversion transformed accountability into persecution, making followers defend him more aggressively the more evidence marched against him. So ultimately, the Trump lies and framing reveals a deeper truth about American political culture. Winning public opinion often matters more than government honesty. Framing allows power to move faster than truth, especially in a polarized societies. The danger is not just that people are misled, but that trust in reality itself erodes. When framing replaces facts, democracy weakens, not because people disagree, but because they no longer share a common understanding of what is real. So, brothers and sisters, I really want to know what you feel about this video, because it's so much important for us to have a talk in regards to this. At the end of the day, these are things that are happening in real time, and we are all seeing what is happening. The world knows what is happening, right? So please let me know what you think about this video. I'm your host and presenter Chitek Stories. But until then, let me see you on my next video. Peace, love, and harmony. Salute.